Welcome back to the Urban channel. Today we're going to give you my final thoughts. I'm going to sum everything up about this scope. This is my final review. Now, first, let's cover tip to butt, just like they would say in the military. You civilians can interpret that however you want, and let's go up front. All right, so there it is, that big and beautiful 120 millimeter objective triplet lens. Yeah, so the optics in this, I found the optics in this scope were really quite good. And Sharpstar actually kind of asked me to compare this scope with the scope that I already have, the SV Bony 122, which a friend of mine has and I get back next month. But the optics, as far as I'm concerned, they're pretty much the triplet, as far as the triplet goes, they're identical, okay? They are not the same optics, okay? This is a 120 millimeter aperture, whereas the SV Bony is a 122. So yes, there's a 2 millimeter advantage to the SV Bony. However, let's talk about the coatings, okay? Because the coatings on the Sharpstar I found to be superior to that of the lens coatings on the SV Bony. The SV Bony, it is a multi-coated optic as well, however, they're just green coating, and this here is a little bit more advanced, and I found that the reflections off the surface of the glass were quite a bit less, quite a bit less than the SV Bony, let's put it that way. Now, another little concern, which I had actually in a previous video, was that the dew shield here, it doesn't extend very far, and as a result, I have had a lot of dew issues with this scope. So if you do get the scope, make sure you have a good dew heater for it. And I was wrapping it right around here, and of course the objective is actually up here, so the heat's kind of got to transfer up there quite a ways. You could put it around here, but there's like an air gap between the dew shield and the optic. At any rate, you know, you're going to need quite a bit of amperage in order to basically keep dew under control. Now, that being said, the shorter dew shield on this compared to the SV Bony, is it going to be an issue for those of you who are worried about stray light? I think they're going to be about on the same level playing field, so to speak. And that is because the coatings in this here are superior, and therefore reflections basically off the optics and so forth because of stray light, I don't think are as much of an issue with this scope. So yeah, they're about on the same playing field as far as that goes. Now let's talk about the focal reducers. So unlike the SV Bony, the SV Bony only gives you an option of a focal reducer. You can actually use a field flattener with it from another scope. You just have to kind of play with your back focus on that scope, and you don't get quite a big field of view, but you know, that's that scope. Let's talk about this one. Yeah, they give you a field flattener and focal reducer option, okay, which is nice. Now, I of course mainly use the focal reducer because I would always trade a little bit of focal length for a wider field of view because stuff in space is really big, and a lot of people forget that, you know, like there really aren't many small things in space except for galaxies, okay, and galaxies are a lot smaller. But anyways, this is the field flattener, which is a big, okay, it's pretty cool. The machining on these things, of course, very impressive. All the threading on these things is gorgeous. There we go. There you go. You can see the optics, and once again, of course, the coatings on these are very impressive. Very minimal reflections on them and so forth. Now let's talk about filters, because out of the box, this scope comes set up so that you can use a 2-inch screw-in type filter, you know, and it's actually a nice solid configuration. One of the benefits of using like an all thread-in type process versus, let's say, a filter door is that, you know, filter parallelism to the sensor can be absolutely perfect, and once you set it up, it's not going to go anywhere, and it's just rock solid, okay? And that's kind of how the system works. So first off, this right here, this is just a cap. Now, both the field flattener reducer and the field flattener have these last two components. Now this section right here, this actually threads off. This is a spacer is what it is. It gets you to the correct back focus. So from this point back is 55 millimeters of back focus. you basically unthread this section right here, and within this you have threading for a 2-inch filter, which we can then thread in like so, okay? And I'm not going to thread it all the way in, but then basically you thread it in that way, and voila, you have your filter all set up and everything, and it's a nice solid setup. Now, with the other SharpStar that I have, the 6180PH Mark II, I noticed that you kind of had to reach inside of the field flattener. It was very awkward and very difficult to get a filter in there without getting fingerprints on it. It's nice to see that SharpStar has kind of like evolved their system and really kind of perfected things. This is a much better setup and certainly easier to like get right. All right, let's talk about the image circle of this scope, because there's some interesting differences between this scope and the SV Bunny that I found. So there are 2 different dimensions to image circle, okay? And manufacturers typically only talk about one of those. And the one that they talk about is the corrected field of view. And one of the reasons why they talk about that one the most is because it's the easiest to get to a big number, okay? And this ASKAR scope, or SharpStar scope, has actually, I got a very big, well-corrected field of view. In other words, like let's say this right here is our image sensor. You can see I've drawn like dots here to kind of simulate stars. In the middle, of course, they're points, and then as you get further out, inevitably, they start to become distorted in some way. Now, the SharpStar definitely has a very well-corrected image circle all the way out to about 44 millimeters, okay? Which is adequate enough for a 35 millimeter sensor. However, the difference between this scope and the SV Bunny I found was in the illuminated image circle, and that's the other dimension that manufacturers don't tend to talk about, okay? In other words, how much vignette is there? So I know with the SV Bunny, there was about a 10% vignette at that distance, but with the SharpStar, I found that it was more like I think it was like almost like a 60% vignette at the edge of a 35 millimeter sensor, which, take it for what it is. For example, when I was guiding with the SV Bunny scope and using like my Duo camera, I was, even with a narrowband filter, I was easily able to guide with half-second exposures, okay? But because of the vignette on the ASKAR scope, is quite a bit smaller, then I had, let's see here, I had to use 2-second exposures in order to get good guiding using this same filter, same configuration, same F ratio, everything. Okay, so there you go. That's what it is. So with the ASKAR, you have a bigger corrected field of view, but you have a smaller illuminated field of view. And how is that going to play in? I know with APS-C size sensors, you'd be fine. But those of you that want to use like a larger 35 mm sensor, you're going to have to deal with a very heavy vignette, which means that you'll need to take very good flats in order to compensate for that. And you're going to have more noise around the outside corners of your image in that kind of situation. Okay, so now the focuser on this guy, I love the focuser on this guy. This thing has such an awesome focuser. It's big, it's strong. I did a separate video just about this focuser where I took it to my machine shop and I did a bunch of tests to it. I encourage you to go watch that. The results are in that video, and that actually kind of brings up, okay, one more difference between, like, let's say if you're comparing the SV Bunny 122 with this scope, which one you should go with. Now, the SV Bunny, it has a good focuser, but it's not quite as monstrous and beefy as this guy is. So what I would suggest is that if you were planning to put a heavy camera and configuration on your scope, then you probably want to go with the SharpStar. If you're going to be using like a lighter weight setup, like let's say just a Duo, this is a very simple lightweight setup, then the SV Bunny's focuser is completely adequate, okay? So for those of you guys who are putting a larger sensor on here with bigger filter wheel and maybe even a rotator, okay, all that extra weight and everything, you're probably going to want to go with the SharpStar because of the focuser. And now, where I found focus about at the 35 millimeter point is where I found focus with the 80 millimeter. And then for those of you that are going to use the field flattener, it was, I think it was around a 45 is where I was able to get focus. And I actually kind of spent a little bit of time going back and forth because I was shooting narrowband and I took a lot longer to focus. But here, I'll back this thing all the way out for you, and you can see that it goes to 100 millimeters, which is about 4 inches, so plenty of travel. And then of course you've got this section of the tube here that you can remove for those of you who want to use a binocular adapter with this scope. And also, SB only gives you 2 spots for a finder and maybe to mount your ASI air. And on top of that, you have this rail up here, okay? So lots of different mounting options, and they give you lots of little thumb screws too. There's thumb screws in every single one of these. So you have plenty of lockdown configurations available to you with this scope. Now, something that a lot of you too will like is the actual rotator here. Has nice degree markings in it. Now I personally like to actually rotate the scope in the actual tube. Okay, kind of like, now it's sticking. There we go, like that. And this knurled ring here I found was really nice for doing that. And I like doing that because then I don't have to redo my flats every single time I rotate this thing. You know, I can't rotate it completely around doing it this way just because the focuser kind of gets in the way. But, you know, you have options at least and everything. And, of course, my opinion on the fit and finish of this scope, you know, it is superbly nicely made. The powder coating on the tube is actually a really nice, it's actually got a little bit of glossy sheen to it. And it's also white. I like white scopes. I don't like black scopes. Why do people make black scopes? Yeah, and of course the anodizing on it is very nice. Something else too, I'm a machinist, okay, so I can look at how the fit and finish and the machining marks on aluminum, and I can, you know, be very critical about this. And I can tell you that it's really good on this scope. And also, comparing it to my Sharpstar 61 EDPH, which is quite a bit older, I think that the guys at Sharpstar have kind of grown and gotten a lot better at this than they were 5 years ago, because the machining on this shows a lot less tumbling, which means that, you know, it means that they're getting it right the first time off the CNC machine rather than having to tumble the heck out of the parts in order to get them smoothed out so they look good. You know, because I know with my 61 EDPH, a lot of the parts on it I can tell are very heavily tumbled, and that of course is to hide machine marks. But so yeah, Sharpstar has obviously grown in that respect and has gotten very good at this kind of stuff. Now, let's talk about the cost too. Like, in my opinion, this is a very well-priced scope. I know I agreed to review it with the option of purchasing it before I even looked at the price. I was like, oh yeah, sure, I will probably buy this scope. When I got the scope and I got involved, and I was really impressed. I was really, really tempted to buy this. And I kind of landed, like, oh, let's see what the price is. And I was surprised to see what the price was, that it is as low as it is. So it's very competitively priced. It's right up there. I know the SV Bony 122 and this guy here, they're kind of neck and neck with price as far as I'm concerned. Now I know these, and of course you have the option of 2 different configurations as far as focal length goes, and it's just a lot of versatility built into this scope. You know, how can I say it? It doesn't go wrong. All right, so let's kind of summarize everything up here. Yeah, it comes with a very nice case, actually. The only complaint I have about cases that come with scopes is that I wish they would set these things up so that there was room in here for a camera and filter wheel to be mounted to it and go in the case, because you have to take the whole thing apart in order to put it in this case. That would be something nice. I haven't seen a company do that yet. I want to start packing it up here. Let's summarize a few things, like, because I got asked to kind of compare this with the SV Bony. So if you need a scope that is configurable for binoculars, you know, this is a good choice over the SV Bony. If you need a scope that has a field flattener and a focal reducer, you know, you want the options to go back and forth, well then obviously that is something that would kind of weigh you more towards this scope. Now, I think occasionally SV Bony does sales, so you might get a better price on the SV Bony every once in a while, but really they're kind of neck and neck as far as price goes. And get out of here. And then the last thing that I would caution you with is that the biggest thing that probably maybe weigh you towards this guy might be the focuser if you're going to use a heavy configuration on this guy. So overall, a great scope. Actually, it is an upgrade, I think, over my SV Bony 122. It's just after using this, I think I'm ready for a bigger scope, something in the 140 range maybe, which Sharpstar does make, or something that's like really fast, so that I can go after really faint things, because I like to image stuff that aren't normal things that people image, that are really faint and take a lot of integration time, or at least really fast optics in order to bring out details. Okay, so this bazooka of a scope here, I got some great images with it, and I got a few other great images that I unfortunately lost because when I transferred them from the internal memory of my ASI Air to a thumb drive, they just disappeared, and it was unfortunate. I lost 4 good pictures. But I have 5 to show you. All of these have been taken with a one-shot color camera, the Duo here, and a few of them are through a dual band narrowband filter. It's the SV Bony 220 here that I have, and yeah, it has been a good experience with it. I didn't have any hiccups here at all. It was a little bit difficult to find focus one night, but I think I was just really tired and probably chemo sick too. And what else is there? Like, the 5 images that I have, go ahead and pay attention to the stars in them. I saw very little discoloration in the stars right out to the edge. On some of them, there was a slight little bit of discoloration, although I think a lot of that, it was uniform across the imaging plane, and so that was actually, I think, due to mainly atmosphere, because, you know, I'm shooting unfiltered, of course, and one of those nights wasn't the greatest of nights. But yeah, I got 5 great nights in a row right after getting this scope, and so it was certainly a pretty exciting week for me to get that many pictures. Yeah, even though I lost 5 of them or 4 of them. But yeah, go ahead and enjoy the slideshow here.